I married a 58-year-old Arab widow who was vacationing in South Beach, Miami, just to settle my family's crushing debts. Everyone said I sold my soul for a paycheck. I accepted that arranged marriage with a heavy, resigned heart, regardless of the age gap or our social status. The only thing that mattered to me was saving my family. But on our wedding night, I never could have imagined what she would ask of me. That was the moment I realized I was no longer just Elias, the 23-year-old kid serving coffee, but a man who had traded his own future to rewrite the fate of those he loved. My name is Elias Vansberry. I am 23 years old, and I work as a server in an upscale lounge amidst the constant hustle of the Miami Beach hotel row. For many, this place is the definition of a dream vacation. Turquoise waters, white sand, and eternal sunshine. But for thousands of outsiders like me, it is a silent battlefield far from home. It is where we trade our sweat for the hope of filling the holes that poverty dug back in our hometowns. 2 months ago, I left behind the humid, heavy air of my small, rural town in the Georgia countryside to exchange it for the salty breeze of the Atlantic coast. I said goodbye to my mother with a long, silent hug, promising her that I would return with more than just empty hands. My father could barely whisper his goodbye from his bed, his hacking cough following him like a dark shadow. My younger siblings watched me from the doorway, with eyes that did not quite understand why I was leaving. But they sensed that something in our family was breaking. From the moment the early morning traffic starts to hum until the lounge closes well past midnight, my life is a single, grinding routine. I bus tables, take orders, and carry lattes and craft cocktails to tourists and expats who seem to live lives 1,000 times more relaxed than mine. The place where I work is called the Sunset Horizon Lounge. The name sounds poetic, but to me, it always felt more like a cage separated from the rest of the world. Everything there is expensive, refined, and flawless. The walls are decorated with black and white photographs of desert landscapes, and the aroma of freshly ground beans mixes with a subtle, expensive perfume I could never quite name. The customers talk about mergers, international travel, and real estate, while I pass between them like a ghost in an apron. My first paycheck vanished in a matter of hours. I sent every cent back home to Georgia to pay for my father's medication and to cover a small portion of the overdue loan payments. Every dollar I manage to save, every breath I take, is for them. For my father, who has been sick for years, and for my 2 younger brothers who are still in school. The nights in the small employees' dorm are not cold because of the temperature, but because of the anxiety that never sleeps. My room is barely a cubicle, with a metal bunk bed, a window facing a narrow alleyway, and a fan that makes more noise than wind. Before I close my eyes, I always replay the same movie in my head, my mother's tired voice on the phone, my father's cough getting heavier, the increasingly aggressive threats from the debt collectors, and my constant promise, "Almost there, Mama. I'll send more soon." Sometimes I wonder if my brothers even remember me, or if they just think of me as the man who sends the money orders. I know that if I stopped working for even a second, the debt would finish sinking our house. I had to put college on hold back in Atlanta, promising myself that one day I would finish that business administration degree I left halfway. I remember the day I got my acceptance letter, how my mother cried with joy, and how my father, still healthy then, hugged me tight and told me I would be the first in the Vansbury family to hold a degree. That dream now feels as distant as the Georgia hills from this flat, sweltering coast. For now, I just repeat a mantra to keep myself from crumbling. Work hard, be honest, and stay out of trouble. That was my entire life plan until she appeared. That morning, the atmosphere in the lounge was more tense than usual, and it was not because of the breakfast rush. It was because of her presence, Zara Aristen. Zara is the owner of the lounge and also several luxury villas spread across the coast. Rumor has it she has import-export businesses spanning from New York to Dubai, that she knows governors and ambassadors, and that her name appears in business magazines next to words like empire and visionary. She is 58 years old, but the aura of wealth and authority surrounding her does not care about wrinkles or time. She is an incredibly wealthy widow of Arab descent, a naturalized citizen who comes to Miami not to vacation, but to oversee her properties. Her presence fills any room like an intense perfume. You cannot ignore her, even if you try. When Zara arrives, everyone, from the barista to the manager, moves faster, stands straighter, and stays much quieter. She rarely speaks, but her dark, piercing eyes seem to strip away every detail and find every flaw. I once saw her fire a supervisor with only 3 sentences, without raising her voice, without even blinking. The man left the lounge with a shattered expression, as if something had been ripped out of him. Since then, we have all been a little afraid of her. On normal days, I barely interacted with her beyond a respectful nod when she passed by. However, in the last few weeks, I felt those eyes lingering on me more frequently. Not the way one looks at just another employee, but the way one evaluates a piece that might serve a greater purpose. At first, I thought I was imagining things, that my exhaustion was making me see signs where there were none. But the other servers noticed it too. "She's watching you, Elias," one of them told me, with a teasing grin. "Maybe she's got a special project for you." One afternoon, I was hurrying to clean up a spill in a corner of the lounge. A distracted customer had tripped over his own suitcase and sent a whole cup of coffee crashing onto the marble floor. Most people would have called the cleaning crew, but I preferred to handle it immediately. The lounge had to be spotless, and I could not stand wasting time or letting others do what I could do faster. I knelt with a cloth, scrubbing until the floor sparkled, and carefully picked up the porcelain shards so I wouldn't cut myself. When I stood up, Zara was standing behind me, holding a steaming porcelain cup. I did not know how long she had been there watching me. "Good work, Elias," she said. Her voice was low and deep, but it did not sound like an order. There was something else in it, something I could not identify at the time. I bowed respectfully, my heart beating faster than usual. "Thank you, Ms. Aristine. You are always here, from opening until closing," she commented, observing my tired face with an attention that made me uncomfortable. "You're never late. You never complain. There aren't many young men like you. Most people your age prefer the parties and the beach. You seem to prefer the work." I could only give a stiff smile, not knowing how to answer. Her praise sounded strange, a bit cool, yet it warmed my chest. To me, it was not a virtue. It was an obligation. If I complained, who would pay my father's hospital bills? Who would keep my brothers in school? I did not have the luxury of choosing rest. "I just try to be responsible, that's all," I replied, lowering my gaze. Zara nodded slowly, as if my words confirmed something she already suspected. In her look, there was something that went beyond a casual conversation between a boss and an employee, as if she were weighing every trait of my character. She said nothing more. She took a sip of her coffee and returned to her table by the window, overlooking the ocean, from where she seemed to contemplate a future that only she knew. Over the following days, I noticed Zara coming to the lounge more often. She was no longer just reviewing papers and talking to the manager. She would sit for hours observing the flow of the place, and her eyes always ended up landing on me. Once, while I was serving an espresso, I saw her smile slightly when I leaned down to pick up a napkin. Another time, when I stayed late to organize the stockroom, I found her at the kitchen door, watching me like someone studying a painting. She said nothing to me, but her presence was like a constant question I did not know how to answer. The manager began treating me better, giving me the best shifts and avoiding reprimanding me even when I made small mistakes. Something is happening, I thought. Something I don't understand. 2 days after that conversation, the blow that split my life in two arrived like a rogue wave crashing against the shore. It was late. We had just closed, and I was wiping crumbs off the counter when the phone vibrated in my uniform pocket. The screen glowed in the darkness of the empty lounge. Seeing my mother's name, my heart sank. She almost never calls after 10 at night. She says late-night calls are bad omens. That could only mean one thing: bad news. I rushed into the small back storage room for some privacy. The smell of roasted coffee and damp cardboard enveloped me as I closed the door behind me. "Mama, what happened, Juan?" I asked, my voice trembling. On the other end, I did not hear the strong woman I knew, the one who raised chickens and sold produce at the market, the one who never complained even when she was in pain. I heard someone drowning in sobs, her voice broken, like stepped-on glass. I hadn't heard her cry like that since my father fell ill 2 years ago. "Forgive me, son," she said between gasps. "They had to take your daddy back to the hospital, to the intensive care unit. The doctor says it's worse this time, that it's serious. He says if he doesn't get specialized treatment soon, he might..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. I knew what came next. I felt like I couldn't breathe. All the effort of these 2 months on the coast crumbled in a second. The double shifts, the tips saved in a jar, the sleepless nights spent crunching numbers. All of it was useless. I leaned against the cold wall of the storage room, feeling my legs give way. "Tell me slowly, Mama. Calm down. What do they need?" I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from someone else's body. She explained that my father had suffered a severe respiratory crisis and a high fever. He had been coughing up blood for 2 days, but hadn't wanted to tell me anything so I wouldn't worry. The hospital expenses this time were much higher than before, far beyond the money I had just sent. And that wasn't even counting the medications that had to be bought separately. I hadn't even finished swallowing that news when the second blow came, more brutal than the first. "And the collector came back today, son," she whispered, with a voice that seemed to beg for forgiveness. "He said if we don't have the full amount by tomorrow morning, he's taking the house. He said time is up. No more extensions. Our house, the only roof we had. The small house where I was born, where my father planted the tree in the backyard, was about to be snatched away for a few $1,000s that should never have cost so much." I remembered the loan shark's smile, a man who had arrived in town 3 years ago, offering easy money. My father had signed without reading the fine print, not understanding that the interest would grow like a plague until it devoured everything. I did the math in my head, though I already knew the result. The figure my mother mentioned was impossible to gather by waiting tables. It was several $1,000s, and I had barely more than 10 in my wallet. Everything else had been sent home the week before. That massive gap between what we needed and what I had in my hand was a cruel joke of fate. "Mama, please, don't tell Daddy anything yet. Don't worry him. I'm going to get the money. One way or another, I'll get it," I promised, though I didn't have the slightest idea how. My voice sounded firm, but I was shaking inside. I hung up, and the storage room became a hermetic box without air, a coffin made of cardboard and coffee beans. I began pacing like a trapped animal, tripping over boxes and shelves. Who could I borrow from? I didn't know anyone I could trust in Miami. I had only been here for 2 months, and the other servers were living just as paycheck to paycheck as I was. I had nothing of value to pawn, no watch, no chain, no new phone. A bank loan would take days, even if they gave one to a kid with no history or collateral. I only had that night, a few hours before dawn, before the collector made good on his threat. Then I remembered a comment from a coworker at the lounge, one of those guys who always boasted about dangerous shortcuts. Black market lenders, sky-high interest, enormous risk, but immediate cash. If you ever need real bread, I know people, he had told me, with a smile that gave me the creeps. I hated the idea. I hated the thought of stepping back into the hell of debt, but for my father and my author, I would have done anything, even if it meant drowning myself. I sank down onto some coffee sacks, my face buried in my hands. The smell of the roasted beans, which used to be comforting, now made me nauseous. I felt like a failure, a useless son. After all the sacrifice, I was going to lose it all. My father could die without treatment, suffocating in a hospital bed while I served cappuccinos to tanned tourists. My mother would be out on the street with my little brothers, with nowhere to go. I wouldn't have the courage to go back to Georgia with empty hands, to look them in the eye and tell them I tried, but it wasn't enough. I started praying silently, though I hadn't prayed in years, asking God, or whoever was listening, to give me a way out, any way out. At that moment, the storage room door opened. The white light from the hallway illuminated my distraught face, revealing the tears I could no longer hold back. Standing motionless in the doorway was Zara, flawless in her ivory silk blouse, looking as out of place among the brooms and grain sacks as a diamond in a junkyard. Her silhouette was framed against the light like an apparition, and for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. I didn't know how long she had been there. She had surely heard a good part of the conversation, my broken voice pleading with my mother not to lose hope. I jumped to my feet, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to regain a composure that no longer existed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Aristine. I just had a personal problem. I'm going back to the bar now," I stammered, feeling the shame burn my face. She didn't move. She looked at me intently, but her eyes were no longer sharp blades. They were a mix of curiosity and something that looked like compassion. Or perhaps it was interest, the kind of interest an investor has when they see an opportunity. At that moment, I couldn't tell the difference. "There's no need to rush, Elias," she said calmly, entering the storage room and closing the door behind her. "I've been here for a while. I heard everything." I felt my stomach drop. Now she knew. the most shameful parts of my life. Our debts, my father's illness, my desperation for quick money, even the temptation to go to the black market lenders. Everything I had tried to hide, all the dignity I had left, was exposed before the most powerful woman I knew. "Don't go looking for those people," she added in a tone that sounded like a warning. "I know them. They will destroy you. Sit down. We need to talk." I obeyed by instinct and sank into a folding chair in front of her, still shaking. The silence was thick, charged with something I couldn't name. I hated that someone saw me at my lowest point. I felt naked, exposed, in front of a woman who, from my perspective, could never understand what it's like to fear losing your home over late payments. She had probably never known hunger, the shame of being unable to pay, the humiliation of begging a lender for one more week. "Don't feel ashamed," Zara began, as if reading my thoughts. "Financial problems are not a disgrace. What is disgraceful is running from responsibilities, abandoning your own, giving up without a fight. And you have done none of that." She paused, took a deep breath, and held my gaze with an intensity that made me look away. "I told you a few days ago. I've been watching you. Your work ethic, your punctuality, the way you send your entire paycheck to your family without keeping anything for yourself. That loyalty and that seriousness are not common. I have known many men in my life, Elias. Rich men, educated men, men of the world. None of them have what you have." I remained silent, waiting to see where she was going. In my head, there was only one persistent question. Is she going to fire me for crying on the clock? Is she going to humiliate me further? But there was also a spark of irrational hope, like a shipwrecked man seeing a light on the horizon without knowing if it's a ship or an illusion. "I know you need a large sum," Zara continued, crossing her legs and adopting a more professional tone. "You need it today before dawn. Your father is in the hospital. The collector is threatening to take the house. I don't need the details. I already understand. I have seen this story many times." She leaned in a bit toward me and lowered her voice as if she were about to say something crazy. "A dangerous secret that no one else should hear. I can settle your family's entire debt. I can secure your father's treatment and your brother's education until they finish college. Tonight, Elias, before the sun comes up." I felt the air rush back into my lungs. It was as if someone had lifted a ton of stone from my shoulders that I had been carrying for as long as I could remember. My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from despair. They were from something I didn't dare call hope. "I don't know how to thank you, ma'am," he meanly said, words tumbling out, almost stuttering. "I'll work for you for the rest of my life. I'll pay you back in installments, with interest, however you want. I'll do whatever you ask. I'll scrub this lounge with my bare hands if I have to." Zara slowly shook her head, and an almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was a smile that, instead of reassuring me, gave me goosebumps. Like when you sense you are about to cross a door from which there is no return. "I don't want your installments or your interest, Elias, and I don't need you to work more than you already do," she answered with a calmness that contrasted with the chaos in my head. "I don't need your money. I have more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What I need is something else, something that money cannot buy so easily." I swallowed hard, feeling sweat run down my back. If she didn't want my money or extra work, what could she possibly want from me? The world suddenly started spinning slower. The storage room walls seemed to close in on us. Then what do you expect from me? I finally asked, cautiously, almost afraid to hear the answer. Zara rested her hands on her knees, looked at the wall for a second, as if preparing the exact words, and then looked me straight in the eyes. Her pupils sparkled under the dim light of the storage room, and for the first time, I noticed something vulnerable in them, something that didn't fit the image of the invincible businesswoman everyone knew. I want you to marry me. The storage room started spinning around me. I was sure I had misheard, that my exhausted mind was playing a cruel joke on me. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe my desperation was making me imagine things. Marry Zara? A woman the age of my mother? My boss? The owner of all of this? A woman who could have any man in the world. Millionaires, actors, diplomats. And she was here in a storage room that smelled of stale coffee, proposing marriage to a small-town waiter. I'm sorry, what? I managed to say, almost laughing from nerves, like when you receive news so absurd that your brain doesn't know how to process it. There must be some mistake, Ms. Ariston. You could have anyone you want. There is no mistake, Elias. I know it surprises you. I also know that what I am proposing sounds at the very least strange, perhaps even offensive. But I am serious. I want you to be my husband. She insisted without looking away. Blood rushed to my face. This was no longer a simple offer of help. It was becoming the most absurd, humiliating, and bewildering proposal I had ever heard in my life. I felt like my dignity was being trampled, like I was being bought like a piece of furniture or an ornament. Was my life worth so little? A pile of cash in exchange for marrying a stranger who was also my boss? I saw myself 10 years from now, turned into the toy of a lonely millionaire, the laughing stock of everyone I knew. Why me? I finally snapped, with a contained anger I couldn't hide. Can't you find someone your own age? Someone from your circle? Your level? Someone who truly loves you, who wants you for who you are and not what you have? Why a waiter who didn't even finish college? Her expression didn't change. She remained calm, secure, as if she had anticipated every one of my objections. Precisely because all the men at my level only see my bank accounts, she replied with a hint of bitterness. I don't need more ambition, Elias. I already had a marriage full of passion and overflowing ambition. It ended up killing my husband, and it almost killed me. Now I'm looking for something else. Calm, peace. Someone I can trust, and someone who can trust me. I see in you something I don't see in them. Honesty, love for your family, the capacity for sacrifice. That is more valuable than a fancy title or a famous surname. She stepped a little closer. Her words began to sound like a verdict, like a sentence that had already been written. I know this is a deal, Elias. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. I don't intend to force you into anything your heart isn't in. Your role will be to accompany me, to be by my side at events, to listen to me when I need to vent, to be the emotional support of this house. I am tired of fighting the world alone, of coming back to an empty house where only the echo of my footsteps waits for me. Or you can go to those black market lenders. Get yourself in debt for life with people who don't hesitate to break legs, and watch them take your house in a few hours while your father suffers in a hospital. The brutality of that last sentence pierced me like a knife. Suddenly, questions about dignity, pride, and love became luxuries I could not afford. What was my pride worth if my father died because of me? What was my dignity worth if my brothers ended up on the street? The faces of my father, struggling to breathe in a hospital bed, of my mother holding the house together with her cracked hands, of my little brothers doing homework on a borrowed table because we had sold ours, they all flooded my mind. Closing my eyes and saying no meant abandoning them. It meant choosing myself over them. And that was something I could never do. I looked at my trembling hands, the same hands that had carried trays and scrubbed dishes for 2 months without rest, the same hands that had hugged my mother before leaving, promising her that everything would be okay. For my mother, for my father, for my brothers, I murmured, looking up at her with wet eyes. I accept. I will marry you. My voice sounded cold, foreign, as if I were hearing it from outside my own body. It was not a promise of love. It was a declaration of sacrifice. Zara smiled, this time without mystery, with the relief that for her was a victory and for me a sentence. But I also saw something else in her smile, gratitude, as if I had given her something she had been searching for a long time. The next morning, I was no longer wearing my waiter's uniform. I was sitting across from Zara in a private suite of a 5-star hotel in Miami, a place where the towels were softer than any sheet I had ever touched, and where breakfast cost more than my weekly paycheck. Between us, on a veined marble table, there was not a drink menu, but a pile of legal documents. In just a few hours after that conversation in the storage room, Zara had moved everything with the efficiency of a machine. She had made calls, sent emails, moved money between accounts. She settled the debt with the collector, sent the money to admit my father to a private clinic with the best specialists, and began pressing our marriage so it would be valid before the law, and if I wanted, before God. The efficiency of a businesswoman like that is terrifying. Months of anxiety tied around my family's neck were resolved in a single night, while I could barely keep my eyes open. I felt relieved and, at the same time, empty, as if my rusty chains had been traded for new ones, shinier and heavier. I still didn't fully understand what he had done, what I had accepted. Here is the proof that the house is no longer in danger, Zara said, sliding a thick envelope with the payment receipts toward me. Your family is safe. I've already spoken with your father's doctor. They are moving him to a better unit. Now, let's talk about our agreement. I nodded, trying to look professional, hiding the trembling of my fingers under the table. This is not just a deal, she continued, pouring coffee with precise movements. We are going to get married for real. That will give you responsibilities, but also rights. I don't want you to think I am buying you. I want you to understand that you are entering a partnership. I understand, I replied, though I wasn't sure I understood anything. First, she read from a sheet where she had noted key points in her flawless handwriting. This marriage is built on sincerity and friendship. I will not force you to love me, nor will I demand marital rights you do not wish for. I chose you because you are different, and I want you to stay that way. Your role will be to accompany me, to be at my side at events, to listen to me, to be the emotional support of this house. I am tired of fighting alone against suppliers, against partners, against a world that only respects power. Those words both relieved me and stung me at the same time. She was acknowledging without decoration that ours was a functional agreement. She gained company and loyalty. I gained the salvation of my family and a more stable future. There was no romance, no illusion, only numbers and needs that fit into an emotional spreadsheet. Second, the money, she continued, gently tapping the table with her fingers. All my assets will remain mine. No one will see you as the owner of what I have built in 30 years of work. You will have a dignified monthly allowance, enough for yourself and to send to your family. You will be free to help them as you wish, but you cannot get involved in the major business or properties unless I explicitly ask you to. Does that seem fair? It seemed more than fair. I wasn't hunting her for her fortune. I only needed my father to live and my brothers to study. I had no intention of taking over anything that didn't belong to me. Perfect, I said. I don't want your money beyond what is necessary for my family. I didn't come here looking for wealth. I know, she replied. And for the first time, I saw something like tenderness in her eyes. That's why I chose you. Third, your family, she added, her look softening. I will take care of your father's medical expenses until he is completely better, and your brother's studies until college, including books, uniforms, and whatever they need. But on one condition, you must not hide our marriage from them. You can spare them the details of this agreement. That's our business. But they will have to know who I am and that I am the one protecting them now. I don't want to be a shameful secret, a lie you have to maintain. I swallowed hard, feeling a new weight fall on my shoulders. How do you explain to your mother, a small-town woman who believes in romantic love and fairy tales, that you've married a woman older than her, your boss, a rich stranger, to save them? What if they feel guilty? What if they think I sold myself? What if they hate her for it and hate me for accepting? What if they don't accept it? I asked, sincerely, fear tinging my voice. What if my mother thinks I sacrificed myself and can never forgive herself? What if my brothers see me as a traitor? Zara smiled with a confidence that threw me off, as if she had already thought through every possible objection. They won't reject me if they see you happy by my side, she answered. Your job will be to convince them and tell them. You chose me because you saw someone sincere in me, someone who offered you a future when you needed it most. Tell them you saw the opportunity for a quiet life and a career by my side. Make them feel proud, not guilty. Don't tell them about the storage room or the tears. Tell them about the hope. It was my new duty. A white lie to let their hearts rest. A beautiful story to cover the uncomfortable truth. And finally, your future, she said, leaning toward me with a new intensity. I don't want you to put your life on hold, to become my shadow without your own identity. You can resume college. I will pay for your studies, whatever you want, wherever you want. I want you to be a prepared husband, capable of helping me manage the lounges and villas, capable of standing before my partners without feeling inferior. You will learn with me. I'm not just offering you money, Elias. I'm offering you a path, a future you couldn't even dream of before. That sentence broke down my last defenses. She was not just buying my present. She was also buying me a future. The degree I had abandoned, the dreams I had buried. Everything was becoming possible again. With a heart full of gratitude, fear, and a strange sense of vertigo, I took the pen she offered me. On the paper, it read that Elias, 23, and Zara, 58, were joining in marriage. I signed with a hand that barely shook, sealing my destiny with black ink. The ceremony was simple, almost discreet, in a private room overlooking the ocean. A few witnesses, a judge who looked over our documents with impassive professionalism, and some of Zara's relatives who scrutinized me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I could feel their eyes fixed on me. Who is this boy? Where did he come from? What is he looking for? I did not bring anyone from my family. Zara and I agreed that we would get married first and give them the news later to prevent them from trying to stop me. I was no longer the waiter from the Sunset Horizon Lounge, but the young husband of a powerful woman. The ring on my finger felt heavy, alien, like a golden shackle. We did not return to the hotel after the ceremony. Zara took me to her private residence in an exclusive cliffside area overlooking the Atlantic. A villa of architecture that was a blend of Arab style and modern American design, with stone arches, murmuring fountains, and gardens that smelled of jasmine. The house was open to the ocean, through a massive window that framed the horizon like a living painting. Each room was the size of my entire house back home. The marble floors reflected the light like mirrors, and there were more bathrooms than people. It was a dream house, enormous, silent, and strange. I walked through the hallways feeling like I didn't belong there, that at any moment someone would come and tell me there had been a mistake, and that I should go back to scrubbing dishes. That night, our first as husband and wife, the tension inside me reached its limit. I was sitting on the edge of a bed far too large for me, in a room adorned with carved wood and dim crystal lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls. I was waiting for my wife. My wife? The phrase still sounded foreign to me, like a language I hadn't learned. The fear wasn't just about the age difference, but because this marriage had not been born of love, but of necessity. I was terrified of what Zara might demand of me in the name of that signed paper. I imagined the worst, becoming an object, a bought body, a trophy she would display to her friends to show she could have whatever she wanted. The bathroom door opened with a soft click. Zara came out in a silk robe that made her look elegant, mature, imposing. She wore her hair down, without the stiff executive style, falling over her shoulders like a dark curtain with threads of silver. She looked more relaxed, more human. But on her face there was not a trace of unrestrained desire. She sat in an armchair across from me instead of approaching the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "You look tense, Elias," she said in a soft, almost motherly voice. "You're pale. Your hands are clenched like you're waiting for a blow." I nodded, unable to hold her gaze. My eyes were fixed on the marble floor. "I'm sorry, Zara. You're nervous," she finished for me. "You've been imagining 1,000 terrible scenarios since we signed those papers. Am I wrong?" I didn't answer, but she knew she had guessed right. She smiled, not with mischief or hunger, but with tenderness, almost like a mother calming a frightened child. "Let's forget the words, husband and wife in the traditional sense for a moment," she proposed, leaning toward me a bit. "I didn't marry you to force you into anything. I chose you because I saw honesty in your eyes, because I saw a man capable of crying for his family in a storage room without feeling shame. I want company, peace, someone to remind me that life is not just work and meetings and numbers on a screen. I don't intend to treat you like something I bought. I want you to feel safe here, This is your home now." She stood up and walked toward the window overlooking the dark sea. The full moon painted a silver path over the waves, and her silhouette was framed against that light like a figure from another time. "I have already loved with badness, Elias," she said, her voice tinged with melancholy. "I had a husband I adored with every fiber of my being, and I lost him. I saw him fall in front of me. I saw him die in my arms. I don't want to repeat that story. Now, I only look for tranquility. A companion, not a slave, nor a toy. Someone who is there when I wake up in the early morning with nightmares. Someone who forces me to eat when work makes me forget I have a body." I turned on the bed, incredulous. Her words were so different from the nightmares I had had that I felt the knot in my chest slowly loosen. I started breathing again, feeling the air reach my lungs. "I'm not going to force you," she concluded, turning to look at me. "This is also your home. I will be your friend, your travel companion. The rest, if it ever has to come, will come on its own. There is no rush, no obligation." She turned off the main light, leaving on a dim lamp that gave an orange glow, and lay down on the far side of the bed, giving me space without touching me. I stayed motionless for a long time, assimilating every gesture, every word. The woman I had imagined as a cold buyer, a collector of human trophies, revealed herself as someone surprisingly careful with my dignity. The fear faded, replaced by something new, respect, and perhaps the first bud of something like genuine gratitude. That night, I did not sleep in terror, but with a strange sense of security. For the first time in months, I had no nightmares. The first days in Zara's villa were surreal, like living inside a movie I hadn't chosen to star in. I went from a tiny, stifling room with damp-stained walls and a mattress that smelled of mold to a bedroom that was almost twice the size of my entire house, back in Georgia. I had my own bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, a walk-in closet full of new clothes Zara had ordered, and a balcony from which I could see the sunrise over the ocean. At first, I would wake up before dawn, out of habit, ready to clean tables or scrub dishes, as if I were still the waiter from the lounge. My body did not understand that the rules had changed. More than once, I caught myself about to wash the breakfast dishes when Zara's voice would stop me. "Elias, take it easy. You're not the kid in the uniform anymore. There are people paid for that here. You don't have to prove anything." But being without anything to do was part of my nature. I didn't know how to sit and watch the ocean and let the day pass. I felt useless, like a piece of decorative furniture taking up space without contributing anything. Our agreement said I should be her support, so I began looking for ways to fulfill that role. Not out of contractual obligation, but out of a mix of commitment and gratitude that was growing in my chest. I soon discovered that behind all that luxury, Zara lived trapped in an exhausting and lonely routine that no amount of money could alleviate. Her real estate and export business controlled everything. She spent hours in front of her laptop calling clients in different time zones, going out to meetings, and returning late, still answering emails with bloodshot eyes. She ate poorly, slept little, and her only company was screens and papers. Many nights I would find her asleep on the sofa in her office, with her glasses crooked and the laptop screen still on, showing endless spreadsheets. The first time I saw her like that, I stood in the doorway not knowing what to do, but something pushed me to step closer. I approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. I turned off the computer carefully, put a wool blanket over her shoulders, and brought her a cup of herbal tea I made from a recipe my mother used for insomnia. Chamomile, linden, and a touch of honey. "Zara, it's late. We should go to bed," I would whisper, gently touching her shoulder. She would open her eyes confused, as if she didn't know where she was. "Are you still awake, Elias?" she would ask, rubbing her forehead. "I was waiting for you." "You need to rest," I would answer. In her eyes, odired but bright, something like gratitude began to appear, something I don't think anyone had given her in a long time. Over time, that small gesture became a routine. In our nightly ritual after dinner, often just for two at an enormous table that could seat 20, Zara began to vent. She no longer talked to me about profit percentages or million-dollar contracts, but about how hard it was to negotiate with greedy people who only saw numbers, about how heavy it was to be the boss of everyone when no one saw you as a person, about the loneliness felt when returning to a gigantic house where no one waited for you with a hug or asked how your day had been. I listened intently, without pretending to be a business expert, without pretending I understood investments. I didn't give her financial strategies or business advice that wasn't mine to give, but I did give her something she had never had: validation. I understand. It must be exhausting dealing with people who only see numbers and don't see the person behind them, I would tell her. You do more than enough. You deserve to rest. You deserve someone to tell you it's okay to let your guard down every once in a while. Thus, little by little, I stopped being the kid from the storage room and became her emotional refuge. She no longer had to feign strength in front of me. She could just be a woman in her late 50s, barred and alone, with wrinkles that makeup didn't entirely hide, and aches that no doctor could cure. That sincere support, which was not born of money, but of my sense of responsibility, and perhaps something deeper I didn't yet know how to name, began to bear visible fruit. Zara looked more serene, less tense. She still worked a lot, yes, but she allowed herself to turn off the laptop before midnight. She started eating better, sleeping more, smiling more frequently. I found a strange happiness in seeing her relax, in knowing that of all the things her money could not buy, the calm I gave her was one of them. As the weeks passed, my role as a silent listener transformed into something more active. One day I saw Zara so frustrated she was putting her hands to her temples and muttering curses in Arabic that I didn't understand, but whose tone was unmistakable. "I don't understand why the coffee shipments for the location in Orlando keep going wrong," she complained, looking at her phone with anger. "That's 3 times now. They've sent the wrong order. I'm about to fly up there and handle it myself, even if I have to load the sacks with my own hands." I was on the terrace, watering her orchids, a task I had taken on without being asked, when I heard her. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I had the right to speak up, but I approached. "I'm sorry, Zara. Can I say something?" I asked, measuring my words. "I don't want to overstep, but I think I know what the problem is." She looked up, intrigued, and set her phone on the table. "The problem isn't in the orders. It's at the central warehouse," I explained, feeling the words come out easier than I expected. "When I worked in the lounge, the sacks always arrived with detailed labels, each with its origin and roast date. But in the last few weeks before I left, they started mixing the premium Arabica with a cheaper blend from another region. The change was noticeable right when they changed the warehouse manager. I saw him many times distracted with his phone while they were unloading without checking the inventories. Zara frowned, surprised, as if I had revealed a secret she had been searching for weeks. "You knew all that?" And never said anything?" she asked, not accusing me, just curious. "I was just a waiter, Ms. Aristine," I admitted, looking down. Who was going to listen to me? But yes, I noticed. The quality dropped exactly 1 week before I left the lounge. She stayed silent for a few seconds, processing the information, and then smiled broadly, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I've only seen the office reports, the numbers on the screen, never the field details. That new manager only shows me percentages, not processes. I don't know why I didn't think of something so simple," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "Sometimes the answer is right in front of your eyes and you don't see it, because you're looking too far away." From that day on, she began inviting me to some meetings on operational issues, always clarifying that I would not make final decisions, but that she wanted my point of view, from the one who is on the ground, who sees what happens while the bosses look at spreadsheets. When she proposed firing that manager, immediately I dared to suggest something else. "Maybe you don't need to fire him," I said carefully. "Give him training, a double-check system, where another employee verifies every shipment. Sometimes people are just overwhelmed, not malicious. If you fire him without giving him a chance, you'll just end up hiring someone else who makes the same mistakes because the system doesn't work." Zara looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. She was used to a world where mistakes were paid with instant firings, where compassion was synonymous with weakness. My more human perspective began to function as a new filter, a perspective she had forgotten or had never had. She accepted my suggestion. They implemented the double-check system, trained the manager, and the problems decreased. Our bond became more organic. We were no longer just boss and employee married for convenience, but two people who complemented each other. She began introducing me in small business circles, not just as her husband, but as someone who helped her see what her ambitions sometimes overlooked. To the world, of course, we remained the strange couple, the rich widow with the poor boy. And that world did not take long to show its teeth. Soon, we began attending important events, gala dinners in ballrooms with crystal chandeliers, charity meetings where the donations had more zeros than my bank account, lunches with foreign investors who talked about millions as if they were pennies, inaugurations of new projects where everyone smiled, even if they didn't like each other. I always walked half a step behind Zara in a rented tuxedo that was a bit too big for me, trying not to look out of place among expensive Italian suits, jewelry that shone like stars, and conversations about the stock market and crypto that I didn't understand. I could feel the eyes fixed on me, scrutinizing, full of judgment. The women's eyes scanned me from top to bottom. The men looked at me with a mix of contempt and mockery. I knew exactly what they were thinking. There goes the gold digger. Another pretty boy who hooked a lonely millionaire? He sold himself to the highest bidder. One night during a very exclusive dinner at a 5-star restaurant, that suspicion became audible. I had stepped away for a moment to the bar for some water, needing a breather from the suffocating atmosphere, when I heard a group of mature women covered in diamonds and dressed in designer clothes talking loudly enough for anyone to hear. They did not bother to lower their voices. They wanted me to hear. "Look at the little boy," one said with a venomous smile. "He's got the face of a saint and the soul of a gold digger. I bet he promised her eternal love while calculating how much every property was worth. Poor Zara. She's so lonely she had to buy herself company," another added, stirring her martini. "He must be thrilled. Villas, cars, trips. Who wouldn't sell themselves for a little luxury? At least I would have picked someone more handsome. I felt my blood boil, the heat rising to my face and tightening my chest. I wanted to turn around and tell them I hadn't asked for any of this, that I had done it for my family, out of desperation, not for luxury or greed. I wanted to scream that they knew nothing of my story, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything. But I held back. I clenched my fists under the bar, digging my nails into my palms. I was not just myself. I was the representation of Zara. If I made a scene, if I responded to their provocations, the mockery would fall on her. They would say she had chosen a savage without education, an impulsive man without class. I took a deep breath, squeezed the water glass until I feared I would break it, and returned to her side as if nothing had happened. She was talking to some investors, smiling with that professional business smile. She saw me arrive pale, my jaw tense, and my eyes bright with contained rage. She said nothing then, but her hand found mine under the table and squeezed it gently, as if to say, "I know. I'm sorry. I'm here." That small gesture calmed me more than any word could. As we finished the event and walked toward the car under the Miami stars, she took my arm firmly, stopping me before I got in. "You heard them, didn't you?" she asked in a low voice, looking directly into my eyes. "It doesn't matter, Zara," I lied, trying to smile. "I'm used to it. I know what they think of me. It's nothing new." "It matters to me," she replied with a hardness in her voice that was not directed at me. "No one has the right to talk to you like that. No one." She said nothing more that night. We drove home in silence, each lost in our thoughts. I thought the subject would end there, just another one of the many poisonous whispers I would have to learn to ignore. I was wrong. The next day, Zara organized a formal lunch at the Sunset Horizon Lounge, the very place where I had served lattes and cleaned tables just a few weeks before. The irony was not lost on me. She invited several influential partners from her circle, including some of the women who had spoken ill of me, and especially a veteran businessman known for his sharp tongue and cruelty disguised as honesty, Mr. Sterling Whitmore. He was a man in his 70s with a vulture-like face and small eyes that sparkled with malice. It was said he had ruined more than one competitor with just one well-placed comment. I was summoned. I felt like I was being taken to a public trial where I was the accused and everyone else was the jury and executioner. During the meal, the conversation revolved around business, investments, and projects. I remained quiet, eating little, feeling like every bite was choking me. Until Sterling, smiling with false concern while tinkling his fork against his wine glass, launched the question everyone wanted to ask, but didn't dare. "Zara," he said, with a voice as honeyed as a serpent's, "we are all very happy to see you so accompanied. It's good to see you aren't alone. But let's be honest, among friends, Elias is very young, and until recently, he was a waiter in your lounge, right? Serving cappuccinos to tourists. Aren't you worried that his intentions aren't as noble as they appear? I mean, with such a fortune at stake, with so many properties and businesses." He left the sentence in the air, as if he were genuinely worried about her, when in reality, he was trying to humiliate me in front of everyone. I was about to open my mouth and defend myself, to tell him he knew nothing of my life, or my reasons, but I felt Zara's hand squeezing mine under the table, with force. I'll handle it. She set her fork on the plate with a deliberate gesture, wiped her lips with the napkin, and looked at Sterling with a serene but firm expression that chilled the air. Then her gaze swept across everyone present, one by one, like a general inspecting her troops before battle. "I am not worried in the slightest," Zara answered Bull with a clear voice that filled the room. "I know Elias's intentions perfectly. I know them better than any of you could imagine. We married because we both needed each other, and because he is, above all, sincere. More sincere than many people at this table. Do you want to know why I chose a former waiter instead of a bank director or a CEO with a Harvard MBA?" Everyone fell silent. Even the servers stopped moving. I felt my heart stop. Because Elias is the only one at this table who didn't see my bank account first, but the person behind it, Zara continued, never looking away from Sterling. He settled his debts with his family at the cost of his pride, and today he honors his commitment to me with a loyalty that none of you could buy, even if you tried with all your money. You wonder how much he earns for being by my side, how much I pay him for every smile. I would ask you, how much is the peace of mind worth that he gives me every night when he turns off my computer and forces me to rest? How much is it worth to have someone who listens to you without judging you, who cares for you without expecting anything in return? You can't pay for that. That has no price. Then she leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a tone that was almost a threat. If anyone here doubts the integrity of my husband, you also doubt my judgment as a businesswoman. You doubt 30 years of experience choosing partners, suppliers, and employees. And if that is the case, if you think I have become so foolish as to let myself be fooled by a boy, perhaps it is best that we do no more business together. She finished with a cutting coldness that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their chairs. The entire table went silent. The only sound was the distant clinking of silverware in the kitchen. Sterling hurried to apologize, red with shame, stammering excuses that no one believed. The Marshalites who had whispered the night before looked down, suddenly very interested in their salads. I, on the other hand, had to swallow the tears that burned in my eyes, tears of gratitude and of something deeper that had no name. Zara was not just defending her young husband. She was betting her professional reputation on me. She was putting years of relationships and important business on the line just so no one would ever speak ill of me in her presence again. That night, back at the villa, I took her hand as we sat on the living room sofa, in front of the window, framing the dark sea. The moon was reflected in the waves like silver fragments, and the silence was comfortable, intimate. "Thank you, Zara," I said, my voice breaking. "You didn't have to expose yourself like that for me. You didn't have to risk your business, your friendships, your reputation. You could have let the comment pass." She looked at me with serenity, with that calm I was beginning to associate with her true self, not the hard businesswoman mask. Of course I had to do it, Elias. We are a team now. You protect me on the inside. You take care of me when no one is looking. I protect you on the outside, against a world that doesn't understand. I won't allow anyone to trample you or doubt what you are to me. Those words marked a before and after. Our bond was no longer just a contract written on legal paper. It was an alliance where we both covered each other's backs, each in our own way. Sometime later, one quiet night by the pool, that alliance became even deeper. The surface of the water reflected the full moon like a liquid mirror. and the murmur of the sea came softly from the nearby cliff. The palms swayed with the night breeze, and the air smelled of salt and jasmine. We were sitting side by side on teak lounge chairs, in silence, enjoying the peace of the moment, when Zara spoke almost in a whisper, as if she were afraid someone else would hear. "There is something I haven't fully told you," she said without looking at me. "Yesterday at the lounge, you asked why I had chosen you, among all the men in the world. I told you about your honesty, your loyalty. It's true. It's all true. But there is another deeper reason, one I've kept for a long time." I knew that conversation would touch an old wound, a scar she kept hidden under layers of success and apparent strength. Zara began to tell me about her late husband, a man named Kareem, of her same culture, and his own boundless ambition. They met at university when both were young, and the world seemed full of infinite possibilities. They fell madly in love, with a passion that consumed everything in its path. Together, they built the empire that she now managed alone. They started with a small import business, then bought their first property, then another and another, until they had an empire of lounges and villas that stretched across the coast. "We worked 18 hours a day," she said, her eyes fixed on the water. "From meeting to meeting, trip to trip, we postponed meals, rest, even our health. We said we would sleep when we were old, that we would rest when we had enough money, but enough never came. There was always another project, another opportunity, another business we couldn't let pass. We thought love and success justified it all. We only lived to grow, grow, and grow." She paused, and I saw her hands trembling slightly on her lap. Her voice became hoarser, more fragile. One dawn, after returning from a business trip to Dubai, Kareem collapsed in his study. There was no warning, no prior symptoms that I had noticed. He simply fell, as if someone had cut his strings. A massive heart attack. The doctor said his heart was exhausted, that he had lived with the stress of a 70-year-old man, even though he was only 45. He died in my arms, Elias. He died while I pleaded with him, not to leave me, to open his eyes, to tell me it was a cruel joke. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry out loud. It was a silent, heavy weeping, accumulated through years of pretending she was fine. I took her hand, which was cold despite the night's heat, and squeezed it tight. I said nothing, because there were no words that could ease that pain. He left, leaving me all this wealth, all these properties, all these businesses, and a void that nothing filled, she continued. Money to buy whatever I wanted, but no one to share it with. Power to order hundreds of employees, but no one to ask me how I felt. Then I understood that we had lived wrong, that we had sacrificed our lives, our peace, our health, and his heart for a pile of properties that meant nothing without him. I kept going with the businesses because it was the only thing I knew how to do. But I felt lonely, as never before in my life. She took a deep breath, as if it were hard to continue, but she did anyway. When other men approached after his death, they brought the same spark in their eyes that Karim had in his last years. Pure ambition. They saw in me a ladder to wealth, not a companion. They courted me with pretty words, but their eyes calculated the value of every property. One after another, I rejected them all. I preferred to be alone than with someone who only wanted me for what I had. Then she said the phrase that completely changed how I saw our marriage. The phrase that was etched into my memory like a tattoo. When I saw you at the lounge, Elias, I saw something different. I saw you work late and send every dollar to your family without keeping anything. I saw you clean a coffee spill without calling anyone, without expecting recognition. I saw you turn off my laptop and bring me an herbal tea, without asking for anything in return, without expecting a reward. I saw the shadow of my husband when he was still good, when he still loved me more than money, but without the fever of ambition that killed him. You know what it is to sacrifice for love, but you also know where the limits are. I don't want a man who pushes me to die working. I want someone who forces me to live. I felt a knot in my throat that prevented me from speaking. Suddenly, I no longer saw myself as the poor boy bought by a rich woman, as the shameful trophy of a lonely millionaire, but as part of a healing plan Zara owed herself. I was not her whim or her amusement. I was her second chance. I haven't just offered to save your family, she concluded, turning to look at me with wet but firm eyes. You are also saving me, Elias. You are giving me a second chance to live with calm, to remember that there are things more important than business. Every time you force me to close the laptop, every time you bring me a cup of tea, you are doing what Kareem never did, reminding me that I have a body that needs rest and a heart that needs company. Thank you for trusting me more than I have trusted myself, I replied, my voice raspy with emotion. I promise I won't let you down. That night, we talked a lot about the future, about how we were going to organize so she would work less without neglecting the businesses, about my studies and the degree I had abandoned, about the family we could become, even if we weren't conventional. The pool water reflected our silhouettes as intertwined shadows, and for the first time, I felt that this strange marriage could become something real, something valuable. Our relationship entered a new phase after that night. We were no longer united only by the urgency of money or the contract signed in a hotel suite. We were united by a shared story of wounds and a search for peace. I began to see her not as my boss, nor as my savior, but as a travel companion who carried her own ghosts. However, there was still a massive bridge to cross. My hometown. I had already told my mother over the phone that I had gotten married, that the debt was settled, and that my father was better in the private clinic. I had decorated the reality with a beautiful lie, that I had fallen in love with Zara for her goodness because I saw something in her eyes I had never seen, and that she returned my love. My mother cried with joy. My father coughed a bit less that day, and my brothers said they wanted to meet her. But in every call, there was an uneasy curiosity, a question they didn't dare ask directly. They wanted to see her, touch her, confirm she was real, and not an invention of mine to calm them. "It's time to go to your house," Zara said one day during breakfast, spreading butter on toast with precise movements. I almost choked on my coffee. "To my hometown? Now?" I stammered, feeling my heart accelerate. She nodded naturally, as if proposing to go shopping. "Of course. Our marriage can't just be papers and photos in a frame. Your family deserves me to go, to show them my face, to see the house I decided to save. I want to know the place that formed you, Elias. I want to understand where you come from." My heart started beating hard. I imagined Zara, with her discreet jewelry and her international businesswoman poise, walking through the unpaved dirt roads of my town, where chickens cross in front of cars and dogs sleep in the middle of the street. I imagined her reaction to entering our small house with cracked walls, stained cement floors, and furniture inherited from 3 generations. I was terrified she would feel out of place, disgusted by the poverty, and that upon returning to Miami, she would regret everything and see me through different eyes. Zara, my hometown has nothing to do with Miami Beach, I tried to explain, looking for the right words. There are no luxury hotels, no pretty cafes, no Michelin-starred restaurants. The road is bad, full of potholes. Sometimes it floods when it rains. The house is very humble. The walls are peeling. The roof leaks. The bathroom is a stall with a plastic curtain. I know, Elias, she interrupted, setting the toast on the plate. And that is exactly why I want to go. I didn't choose you for your money or your fame or your properties, because you had none of those things. I chose you for the man your home built, for the values you learned in that humble place. I am not going in search of comfort. I am going to honor the place that made you who you are. Besides, I am a businesswoman. I have traveled to developing countries. I have visited factories in rural areas. I have seen every level of wealth and poverty that exists. I am not going to look down on your home. As a woman of tradition, Zara took this visit with a seriousness that surprised me. We won't go in a private jet or first class, she said firmly, as if dictating the rules of a negotiation. We'll drive, and we won't stay in a hotel, but in your house. I want your family to see us as we are, not as tourists coming to visit with bodyguards. I almost fainted. But the bed is hard, the mattress is old, the bathroom is ancient, and the water comes out cold, I protested, imagining her reaction to the discomforts that were normal for me. I'm not going to look for soft mattresses or perfect pressure showers, Elias. I'm going to look for the heart of your story. And your family needs to see that I am willing to step out of my comfort zone for you all. If I can't sleep one night in your house, what kind of wife would I be? She began preparing her suitcase with the same care she put into her negotiations. No designer dresses, no impossible heels, no jewelry that would call attention. She packed simple cotton tunics, discreet scarves to cover her head if needed, comfortable fabric shoes. She'd even asked me to teach her some phrases in the local dialect spoken by the elders of the town to greet my mother with respect. What if I pronounce something wrong and they laugh at me? She asked, laughing at herself while practicing in front of the mirror. They will laugh, yes, but with affection, I told her, moved. What counts is the effort. In my town, that is worth more than any expensive gift. Seeing her practice those simple words with such dedication, making mistakes and trying again, made my heart soften even more. Zara had not just paid our debts. She was doing everything possible to become a real part of us, to stop being a stranger with money and become someone loved. The drive was long, crossing asphalt highways, then dirt roads, then paths between cornfields, and blue mountains on the horizon. On the way there, we barely spoke. I was chewing over my nerves, thinking about every possible reaction from my family. Would my parents be ashamed to see her arrive? Would they see her as a savior, a miracle from heaven, or as the living proof of my sacrifice? Would they feel guilty that I had to sell myself to save them? The landscape changed from tropical palms to mountain pines, and with every mile I felt I was approaching a moment of truth I couldn't avoid. Finally, we turned onto the dirt path that leads to my house. There were no longer collectors hanging around the corner, just the silence of the afternoon, the singing of birds and the smell of wood smoke that I will always associate with my childhood. Zara put her hand over mine, which was gripping the steering wheel too tightly. "We're here," she whispered with a smile that calmed me. "Breathe, Elias. Everything is going to be okay. My mother, my father, already somewhat recovered and standing, though leaning on a cane, and my two younger brothers were waiting for us in front of the house, dressed in their most decent clothes, the ones they kept for town festivals. Their eyes were full of emotion and nerves, of expectation and fear. My mother was wringing her hands on her apron. My brothers couldn't stop moving. When Zara got out of the car, she didn't hide behind dark glasses, nor did she stay behind me like an uncomfortable guest. She walked toward them with a sincere smile, her head high, but without arrogance. She didn't look at the cracked ground full of weeds, nor the old furniture visible through the window, nor the peeling paint on the walls. She only looked at their faces. She hugged my mother with respect, holding her as if she were an older sister. She kissed her hand with a gesture of reverence she learned from her culture, and in the dialect she had practiced for weeks. She let out a clumsy but charming greeting that meant something like, "May your house always have blessings." The pronunciation was terrible, but the effort was evident. My mother burst into tears, but they were not tears of pity or shame. They were pure gratitude. She hugged Zara tightly, murmuring blessings in response. Zara refused to sleep on the best mattress we had, the one my brothers had yielded and prepared with clean sheets. She preferred the room where I had grown up, with peeling walls and damp stains, a window that barely closed and let in the early morning cold, and a thin mattress that sank in the center. She did not complain about the mosquitoes that buzzed all night, nor the bone-chilling cold, nor the rooster that crowed at 4 in the morning. She sat on the floor with us on an old, worn mat. She ate bean soup and corn tortillas as if they were a king's banquet. She listened to my brother's stories about school and football, and laughed with them when they told jokes I had forgotten. One noon, while the sun fell vertically over the yard, my mother served her hot tea in a dented tin cup, the same one we had used since I was a child. My mother's face was full of shame as she extended the cup with trembling hands. "Forgive us, Ms. Ariston. This is all I have," she said, looking down. "We don't have porcelain or fine crystal, only these old things." Zara held the cup with both hands, with the same care I had seen her give a fine porcelain cup at her gala events, and smiled. "This is the most delicious tea I have ever had," she replied, looking my mother directly in the eyes, "because it comes from your hands and your heart. There is no luxury that can equal that. No crystal cup could make this tea taste better." I saw my mother's face transform in that instant. Her shame turned to pride. Her slumped shoulders straightened. And at that moment, under the shade of an old guava tree in the yard where I had played as a child, I understood something fundamental about Zara. She was not a woman hooked on luxury, nor a capricious millionaire. She was someone capable of putting soul above appearances, of valuing a tin cup more than a crystal glass if it came from the right place. Then a massive truth hit me like a wave I didn't see coming. My father was better, breathing without the previous whistling, walking with his cane in the yard. The house was safe. There were no longer collectors threatening at the door. The debts were gone, erased as if they had never existed. My brothers would go to college. They would have a future. I was free. If I had wanted, I could have asked her for a divorce later, in a few months or a year. I could get my life back, my plans, now that everything was resolved. I was no longer tied by anything more than a signed paper and a verbal agreement. Legally, I could go. but just imagining her absence hurt like a deep cut in my chest. I imagined waking up without the sound of her footsteps in the hallway, without the smell of her discreet perfume, without her voice asking me how I had slept. I imagined going back to the employees' dorm, serving coffees alone again. The image was unbearable. I realized that without noticing it, sometime between the nights of tea and the conversations by the pool, I had fallen in love with her. Not with an adolescent love, burning and uncontrolled, one of those that burns out fast and leaves ashes, but with a firm, mature, and serene one, the kind built brick by brick. I loved her for her strength and her calm, for her way of facing criticism without trembling. I loved her for her humility in sitting barefoot on the floor of my house and drinking tea from a dented cup. I loved that, with her age and her power, with everything she could buy, she was willing to cross a dirt road just to honor my parents. That love didn't appear all at once like a lightning bolt. It grew from respect and gratitude, day by day, gesture by gesture, until it became a certainty. And now that I recognized it, I couldn't ignore it. That afternoon, while we walked alone along the path between the cornfields swaying in the wind, I took her hand with decision. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. "Zara," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "I am happy here, and I am happy with you. I don't regret anything. Not the storage room, not the contract, not the signature. Thank you for saving my family, and thank you for saving my heart without knowing you were doing it." She stopped in the middle of the path, looked into my eyes with an intensity that took my breath away, and smiled with a mix of relief and tenderness, as if she had waited for those words for a long time. "I am happy too, Elias, happier than I have been in years. I know it hasn't been easy for you, that you've had to endure mockery and doubt, that it cost you to accept this strange situation. But I promise you that I will never make you regret this decision. I will never make you feel bought or trapped." We didn't say the word love out loud, but we both felt it breathing between us, floating in the golden afternoon air. The return trip to Miami was very different from the way there. On the way there, I was a boy tied by a deal, chewing over nerves and fears. On the way back, I was Zara's husband by choice of the heart. We talked the whole way without filters or masks, laughing at anecdotes from the town, planning the future. She confessed to me that she had felt embraced by my family like no one had embraced her in years. That for the first time since Kareem's death, she had felt part of something bigger than herself. I told her my family was at peace because they saw me at peace, because they had seen in my eyes something they hadn't seen in a long time. Tranquility. When we returned to the cliffside villa, the place no longer felt foreign or threatening. The marble hallways no longer intimidated me. The enormous rooms no longer made me feel small. It was our home. I took up my double role with more conviction than ever. Protective husband by night and business partner by day. Zara continued directing her empire, but no longer alone. She no longer carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without help. I reviewed proposals and projects with her, gave my opinion when she asked for it, and sometimes even when she didn't. One day, a gigantic investment opportunity arrived, a hotel development that promised enormous profits, multiplying capital in a few years, but in exchange for months of constant stress, endless trips, and sleepless nights. Exactly the rhythm that had killed Kareem. The numbers were tempting, the projects brilliant, the partners enthusiastic. But when Zara showed me the documents, I saw something else in her eyes. The spark of ambition she had learned to have. I told her carefully The business is good. The numbers add up. But you would have to go back to that old rhythm. The rhythm that almost cost your first husband his life. Is it really worth it? Is another $1,000,000 going to make you happier than you are now? She looked at me for a long time in silence, processing my words. Then she smiled with a smile that no longer had hunger, but peace. No, I already have enough. More than enough. I don't want more millions that steal my time with you, that steal the sunsets by the pool, that steal the tranquility that cost me so much to find. She rejected the project with a short call, a decision that the old Zara, the one who lived to grow, would never have made. And I knew then that our marriage had changed something fundamental in her, just as it had changed something fundamental in me. Just as she promised on the day of the agreement, she enrolled me again in university through distance learning. I returned to studying business administration, resuming the degree I had abandoned 2 years before, while continuing to learn from her in the real world. Her way of negotiating with suppliers, her past mistakes and the lessons she drew from them, her current limits and how she had learned to respect them. In the mornings, I sat with books and screens taking notes, taking exams. In the afternoons, I accompanied her to supervise lounges and villas, to meetings with partners, to property inspections. It was a double education, the theory of books and the practice of real life. When I was ready, when I finished the degree and proved I could handle serious responsibilities, she entrusted me with the general management of the Sunset Horizon Lounge and some small lodgings in the chain. She didn't do it because I was her husband. It wasn't a gift or a whim. I earned it through hard work, with nights of study and days of labor, with proposals that worked and mistakes I learned from. The employees who before saw me as the waiter who married the boss began to respect me as someone who knew the job from the bottom up, who had scrubbed dishes and served coffees and knew what the heat of a kitchen at noon was like. Sometimes, while I checked the movement of boxes in the warehouse or talked with managers about coffee orders, I remember that night in this very place. The night I thought I had lost everything. When I cried over the grain sacks while my world collapsed. There, desperate and alone, I accepted selling my future in exchange for saving my family. I thought it was the end of my dreams, the death of my dignity. Today I understand that in reality, I was buying something much bigger without knowing it. Not just a house free of debt, nor a university degree, nor a manager position. I was buying, without realizing it, the opportunity to know a different kind of love, a love I didn't know existed. On any given afternoon, Zara enters the lounge with a container in her hand, one she prepared herself in the kitchen at home. She no longer comes to review balances or inspect employees, but to eat with me, to share the lunch hour like any normal couple. She sits at our favorite table, the one overlooking the Atlantic sunset, the same table where a nervous waiter once served cappuccinos, never imagining what fate had in store for him. She smiles at me as if it were still a novelty to see me in a suit and tie, with my name embroidered on the shirt, giving orders instead of taking them. "How's everything going, honey?" she asks, using a word that now sounds natural in her mouth, without artifice or discomfort. "Good, very good," I answer, closing my notebook. "I've already made sure you don't have any meetings after 6 today. Tonight we rest. No laptops, no emails, no numbers." She laughs happily with that laugh I have learned to love more than any other sound. She lets me kiss her on the forehead, closes her eyes for a moment, and leans back in her chair, looking at the sky that is beginning to turn orange and pink. The sun hides little by little behind the sea. The same sea that before seemed like a cold and distant curtain, a reminder of how far I was from home. Now I feel it as warm as the soft closing of each day we share, like a promise that tomorrow there will be another sunset, and another after that. I am Elias Vansberry, the 23-year-old boy who married a 58-year-old rich widow to settle his family's debts. Everyone thought I was a gold digger, an opportunist, a sellout. What no one saw, what they couldn't understand, is that in that transaction that seemed so cold, in that contract that seemed so mercenary, I didn't just save our house and my father's life. I found the most serene and true love I ever imagined. A love that was not born of whim or blind passion, but of renunciation and sacrifice. And that has become the greatest wealth of my life. A wealth that no balance sheet can measure, and that no debt collector can ever take away from me. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.